Most people think money problems begin with low income. I do not believe that. I think money problems often begin much earlier. In the mind, in the place where a person quietly decides what money means. If money is a scorecard, then no amount will ever feel like enough. If money is a tool, then even a modest amount can change a life. That difference has mattered to me for a very long time. I have seen people with almost no formal financial education build strong, stable lives because they had good behavior. I have also seen very intelligent people with elite credentials ruin themselves because they could not control envy, impulse, or ego. That is one of the strangest things about money. In most professions, superior technical skill wins. In money, behavior often outruns intelligence. A man who never learned fancy formulas can still do very well if he spends less than he makes, saves steadily, invests patiently, and refuses to let comparison eat his mind. Another man can go to the best schools, know every acronym on Wall Street, and still go broke because he needs the world to see him winning. That is why I have never thought financial success begins with secret knowledge. It begins with self-control. People do not like hearing that because self-control sounds simple. But simple is not the same as easy. It is easy to get a credit card. It is easy to buy things that flatter the present and punish the future. It is easy to let social media convince you that normal life is failure. It is easy to treat your neighbors, your coworkers, or strangers on the internet as the standard by which your own life must be judged. It is easy to mistake wanting for needing. That ease is expensive. One of the most dangerous things a person can do is confuse money with identity. Once that happens, every decision gets distorted. A bigger house is no longer shelter. It is evidence. A nicer car is no longer transportation. It is self-worth on wheels. A vacation is no longer rest. It is social proof. A purchase is no longer about utility. It is about whether the world will read you correctly. That game has no finish line. I have watched too many people spend their lives chasing a moving goalpost. They think if they get to one number, one house, one raise, one level of visible success, they will finally feel settled. Then they get there and discover the target already moved. Now the comparison is different. Now somebody else has more. Now the standard is higher. Now the life they once dreamed of feels ordinary. That is how people stay broke with high incomes, not because they never earned enough. Because their expectations rose faster than their contentment. The hardest financial skill in the world is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Not because ambition is bad. I have no quarrel with ambition. I like ambition. I admire people who work hard and want more out of life. But ambition without internal control becomes a treadmill. You run faster and faster, and the machine calls it progress while your peace keeps shrinking. If you ask me what most people really want from money, I do not think the answer is a private jet or a giant yacht. Those are fantasies people borrow from the culture around them. Most people want something much more human. They want stable housing. They want the ability to handle a surprise bill without panic. They want some dignity in retirement. They want freedom to spend time with family. They want sleep. They want breathing room. They want a little cushion between themselves and catastrophe. Those are not greedy goals. Those are reasonable goals. And the good news is that those goals are much more reachable than the culture wants you to believe. The bad news is that they require behavior most people do not want to practice. They require accepting that enough is better than more, if more keeps you anxious. They require understanding that rich and wealthy are not the same thing. A rich person may have a large income, a large house, and a visible lifestyle. A wealthy person has something much rarer. A wealthy person has money that is not being spent, money sitting quietly in savings, money invested with patience, money that buys options, money that says you can walk away from something foolish, money that gives you independence from other people's opinions, money that allows you to say no. That no is one of the highest luxuries in the world. People think the luxury is the car. Very often the luxury is the ability to ignore the car. I have always thought savings was misunderstood because people describe it as delayed gratification. That is only half true. If I save $100, I am not merely postponing pleasure. I am buying a small piece of future independence today. I am buying the right to be a little less afraid tomorrow. I am buying a better night of sleep. I am buying time that does not already belong to somebody else. That is how I have viewed it for most of my life. Every dollar saved is a piece of my future that I own. Every dollar of debt is a piece of my future that somebody else owns. That framing changes everything. If a person sees savings as idle money, then of course saving feels pointless, especially if the amount seems small. Why save $20 if $20 will not transform your life overnight? Why save $100 when the larger goal still feels far away? But if that same person sees savings as purchasing independence, today the logic changes. $20 is not trivial. It is $20 of future flexibility. It is $20 that may keep a small emergency from becoming a larger one. It is $20 of dignity. Anything is better than nothing. People routinely underestimate how powerful that idea is. They assume financial security is a black and white condition. Either I am rich or I am stuck. Either I am fully independent or I am not. That is not how life works. Financial independence exists on a spectrum. Every dollar moved into savings moves you slightly toward peace and slightly away from dependence. That should matter more to people than it does. One of the biggest mistakes people make is waiting to feel wealthy before they behave wisely. The truth is usually the opposite wise. Behavior creates wealth slowly, and by the time the number looks impressive, the habits are already old. That is why automation matters so much. Human beings are emotional. We get tired, we get distracted, we feel deprived, we compare ourselves to the wrong people, we have bad days, we justify, we rationalize. If you can take some of that behavior out of the equation and make saving automatic, you give your future a chance. A person does not need a perfect personality to do well with money. He needs systems that protect him from his worst moods. I have never thought budgeting was about punishment. At its best, it is awareness. Many people with money trouble are not stupid. They are ignorant in the literal sense. They do not know how much is coming in. They do not know how much is going out. They do not know where it leaks. They feel overwhelmed by money because money lives in fog. Fog makes everything look larger and scarier than it is. Clarity is a financial advantage. If you know your bank balance, if you know your income, if you know your real monthly burn rate, if you know what habits are quietly draining you, then you are already ahead of many people who earn more and understand less. The culture does not help. The culture teaches you to perform wealth rather than build it. It teaches you to be impressed by visible consumption and uninterested in invisible resilience. It teaches you to think that the person with the nicest car must be doing better than the person with the fullest emergency fund. It teaches you that buying now is confidence and waiting is weakness. It teaches you to compare yourself endlessly. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to stay poor while appearing normal. People like to say they want more money. Often what they actually want is relief from comparison. They want the inner ache to stop. They want to feel that they are not behind. But comparison has no end because there is always somebody with more. The algorithm will make sure of that. The internet has taken an ancient human weakness and industrialized it. Your grandparents compared themselves with neighbors. You compare yourself with the best edited moments of millions of strangers. That is not a fair fight. So one of the most valuable financial moves a person can make is not opening a new account or finding a new stock. It is changing the frame. Stop using money as a yardstick against other people. Start using it as a tool to build the kind of life you would still want if no one could see you. That is a revealing question. If I lived on a deserted island with only the people I loved, how would I actually want to live? What kind of house would I want? What kind of car would I need? What purchases would still matter? The moment you ask that, honestly, a great deal of status spending begins to look foolish. Nobody wants to impress strangers on a deserted island. They want utility, they want comfort, they want meaning, they want peace. Most people already know this deep down. They just keep forgetting it in public. I learned long ago that people are not thinking about you as much as you think they are. That sounds like an insult at first, but it is actually liberating. People may admire your possessions briefly, but what they are really imagining is themselves with those possessions. They are not building shrines to your life. They are running private fantasies through their own heads. Once you understand that, the urge to spend money for public approval begins to look ridiculous. If you buy the car to be seen, you are buying for an audience that does not exist in the way you imagine. If you buy the house for envy, you are making payments to strangers who will forget your address. If you buy the clothes for validation, you are spending on an illusion of attention. That does not mean never spend on pleasure. I am not advocating monkhood. Money can absolutely be used to create a better life. There are things worth paying for. There are conveniences worth buying. There are experiences worth remembering. There are purchases that genuinely improve family life, health, safety, joy, and time. But those are very different from purchases made to settle status anxiety. A wise spender learns to separate the two. That requires honesty. Why am I buying this? Is this making my life better or just making me visible? Is this serving utility or ego? Is this filling a real need or a temporary emotional hole? People often know the answer before they finish the question. A lot of bad financial behavior is emotional behavior. Wearing a shopping bag. Stress turns into spending. Boredom turns into spending. Insecurity turns into spending. A person feels behind, empty, unattractive, unseen, or stuck. And the purchase briefly creates the illusion of movement. The problem, of course, is that the feeling returns and the bill stays. If the spending happened on credit, now the future has to pay for an emotional event that lasted a weekend. That is a terrible trade. I sympathize with people who get trapped there. I do not judge them, but I do think the way out begins with blunt truth. Buying things rarely fills the emotional hole. People hope it will fill. If anything, it often deepens the hole by adding debt, guilt, clutter, and regret to the original pain. Debt is one of the clearest examples of money becoming psychological. People talk about interest rates and minimum payments which matter. But debt is not only arithmetic. It is a claim on your future time. It is a form of reduced freedom. It narrows options. It makes risk harder. It makes rest harder. It makes every setback more dangerous, because there is already less cushion available to absorb it. That is why independence matters so much. I have never wanted money so that I could live some flashy fantasy. I wanted money so that I could wake up and know my choices belonged to me. The person with less income but more freedom may be living a far richer life than the person with more income and no control. There are people with vast net worths who are still beholden to investors, social expectations, family pressure, reputation management, and the need to constantly feed an expensive identity. There are also modest people who have real internal freedom because their needs are reasonable and their savings give them room. That is one of the great truths about wealth. Independence is the flex, not the consumption it permits. This way of thinking also changes how a person invests. Most people assume investing success belongs to experts, to people with better information, better education, better connections, and a higher tolerance for complexity. I do not think that is the part that matters most. What matters most is patience. Compounding is one of the simplest and most extraordinary forces in finance. Gains create gains. Time multiplies ordinary discipline into something that looks like magic. But the secret of compounding is not brilliance. It is duration. How long can you keep the machine running without interrupting it? That is the question. People underestimate how much greatness in investing comes from being average for an unusually long time. You do not need to outsmart everyone for 1 year. You need to remain sane for many years. That is much harder. An ordinary person who invests consistently, keeps costs low, owns broad index funds, and leaves the money alone for decades can do extraordinarily well. The returns may not look dramatic year by year. In some years they will look disappointing. In some years they will look frightening. But the patience itself becomes an advantage, because so few people can tolerate a boring good plan for a very long time. Most people are attracted to action, compounding rewards endurance. If I had to choose one investment trait above all others, it would not be genius. It would be the emotional ability to let a sensible plan continue through both excitement and boredom. The market charges a fee for long-term returns, and that fee is uncertainty. If you cannot pay that fee emotionally, you will not collect the reward. That does not mean every person should invest aggressively. I have never believed finance should be separated from sleep. If maximizing returns destroys your peace, then you are optimizing the wrong variable. Money is supposed to serve your life. It is not supposed to turn your nights into a referendum on whether your spreadsheet is efficient enough. People ask how much risk they should take. I think the better question is what kind of life they are trying to support. If an all-stock portfolio leaves you staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, then maybe it is too much for you, even if some advisor says it is mathematically ideal. Numbers alone do not live your life. You do. That is one reason I like simple investing structures. Simplicity increases the odds you will stay with the plan. Complexity invites tinkering, ego, and panic. The more moving parts, the easier it is to convince yourself you should do something dramatic. And dramatic often destroys what patience was slowly building. I have also seen that people treat income as stable when it is often fragile. Over a lifetime, almost everyone will face some kind of disruption, job loss, illness, divorce, recession, bad timing, family crisis. The odds that life proceeds in a smooth, straight line are essentially zero. That is why savings matters so much. It is not about pessimism. It is about admitting that life is fragile, whether or not we enjoy admitting it. The person who saves is not saying disaster is guaranteed tomorrow. He is saying uncertainty is guaranteed eventually. That distinction matters. Savings is how you prepare without living in fear. There is a kind of emotional maturity that comes from lowering the pressure on money. I do not mean lowering ambition. I mean lowering the impossible burden people place on money to fix everything. More money can solve some problems. It can solve many practical problems, but it cannot solve the largest psychological ones if those are rooted in comparison, emptiness, or confusion about what a good life looks like. That is why contentment matters so much. Contentment is not passivity, it is not laziness. It is not giving up on improvement. It is the ability to enjoy what you already have while still working toward what may come next. A person without contentment is always psychologically homeless, no matter how nice the house becomes. I think gratitude is one of the few forces strong enough to interrupt the cycle. Gratitude is unfashionable because it sounds soft. It is not soft. It is a reordering of attention. It is choosing to focus on what is already present instead of only what is missing. Without that choice, expectation becomes a tyrant. With it, money becomes less desperate. There is another reason contentment is powerful. It protects you from taking foolish risks simply because you feel behind. People blow themselves up financially when they believe that ordinary progress is too slow and only a dramatic leap will save them. They chase status, leverage, speculative bets, and overextended lifestyles because stable incremental growth feels humiliating. That is how moving goalposts turn dangerous. The feeling of behindness becomes the mother of bad decisions. The patient person has an edge here. He is not in a race with strangers. He is building, and building looks slower than chasing, right up until the moment the chasers collapse. If somebody feels financially overwhelmed today, I would tell them two things. First, do not confuse shame with truth. A lack of savings does not make you a bad person. Poor past decisions do not make you doomed. Plenty of people are in the same position. Second, stop looking for a secret door. The door is ordinary. Know what comes in, know what goes out. Cut the comparison, save something, automate it, reduce unnecessary debt, buy less approval. Invest with patience. Keep your expectations from running wild. That list is not glamorous, it works. People often think there must be more to it because the answer sounds too simple. There is not always more to it. Sometimes the difficulty is not complexity. Sometimes the difficulty is that the simple answer requires a person to change how he sees himself and how he wants to be seen by others. That is much harder than learning formulas. In the end, I think the real battle around money is not between rich and poor. It is between internal control and external comparison. One path says build a life. The other says perform a life. One path leads to enough. The other path keeps inventing new versions of not enough. One path uses money to buy freedom. The other uses money to chase status that never settles. I know which path I prefer. I would rather have a modest life with real independence than a larger life owned by other people's opinions. I would rather save quietly than spend loudly. I would rather be patient than impressive. I would rather use money as a tool to sleep better at night than as a weapon in a comparison. I cannot win, and if a person can truly learn that lesson, he may discover that the richest feeling in the world is not having more. It is needing less from the world to feel whole.